Hello friends, if you can all hear me, give me a thumbs up. We are live and we have started this lecture series where I have live audience here in front of me. The topic of the lecture series is going to be on how Islam was concocted. I'll give you a bit of background about Islam, the geopolitics, and how religions as a whole began, and how we perceive Islam today, and why I think Islam is concocted and it has no basis. Islam as a religion began 1400 years ago, but most of the Muslims, scholars, they will say that Islam claims to be a religion that began with Adam, the first human being that Allah created. We also know the Adam and Eve story from Genesis in the Bible. But those are all faith-based. But what we are going to do here, we're going to decipher Islamic claims on the basis of archaeological findings and neutral research into the anthropology of religions. If you want to participate in our live classroom where you can come, sit in front of me and ask questions, you need to send us an email and you need to send a text to us. The numbers will be given to you at the end of this lecture series. It is going to be about 12-part lecture series on this particular issue, and I'm going to cover the first lecture today. Coming to the issue of Islam, whether it's a religion which really connects us to the Creator, we have to accept that all the religions are trying to answer the question whether there is something that we know as soul exists, that we still live on after our death. And whether religious scriptures have the answer to the mystery, whether there is a life hereafter. As you all know, I am someone who has spent decades, over 3 decades, into preaching Islam. And whilst preaching Islam, I also researched into other major religions, world religions, including Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism, and all. And I left religion, all religions, and I don't have respect for any religious beliefs. And I left Islam in April 2016. So I can say that I am an authority in the field because I preached Islam and I debated famous scholars of all religions, and also I even debated atheist leaders, and that gave me the know-how that I needed to say that I am an agnostic man now, and I am an agnostic man because I dug deep into all the religions, not only scriptures but also into geopolitics. I've been to many countries around the world. I lectured in many areas of religions. Whenever I'm asked why I left religion, why I left Islam, I always said the same thing, that I was pushed out of Islam because of immense hate that it pours out for non-believers, and that's by itself is enough for me to believe Islam is baseless. I was an apologetic preacher all my life, and I come from a very well-known Islamic preaching family, which they date back to 250 years of proven track record of our history as preachers of Islam. My family had a lot to do with the preaching of Islam in what we know Bengal today, which includes West Bengal, Bangladesh, and the Rakhine state of now known as Myanmar. When I left Islam, it was not an easy task. I was severely depressed for a while, sad, and I ended up losing a lot. I lost my profession because I cannot be expected to work at any law office without the possibility of being shot at by enthusiastic Muslims. And also, I lost my family. My mom doesn't talk to me. My sisters don't talk to me. My wife left me with my son, and we are going through divorce at the moment. I lost all my friends, all my lifelong friends, and those are enough to say that such a religion cannot be something which can be conducive to mankind. But I'm going to look at what you all should look at to see whether Islam can be challenged from a general point of view. You might have left religion. You can be a ex-Christian, ex-Hindu, ex-Buddhist, ex-Jew. You might have left your religion because something triggered in your life and you thought that's enough. I left it. That's it. It can be true. But I, being someone who always loved to find the answer to the mystery of where we come from, what is the reasoning behind all this apparent existence, I spent decades researching into. If my mom is listening to this video, I think she knows that I left home at the age of 16 in quest of the truth. I debated all my life, but I'm not going to address from a certain point of view how I think Islam is a concocted religion, because the primary purpose of this lecture series is to address Islam. Other religions may come into the conversation for the sake of understanding, but the primary purpose is to prove to you how Islam is a concocted religion. And to do that, I will give you several reasoning, several things to consider whilst thinking of how to think for yourself and reflect on your understanding of religions as a whole and Islam in particular, how it came into being such a massive religion. Islam, according to the Vatican Chronicle, Sunni Islam is the biggest religious denomination in the present world, and Muslims generally tend to be very religious people. As I was saying at the beginning of the lecture that the main reason that we believe, because we don't have the answer to questions like where did we come from, what is the purpose behind this apparent existence, where are we going, do we have a life hereafter, is this what it is, why is it so, what was the purpose behind all this apparent existence, why do we have this rational mind, why do we question, why do we look for where we came from? As I believe, those questions are still not conclusively answerable, but still I believe that there is no reason for believing all these organized religions to be answering those questions, because I believe that we don't have the answer, but that doesn't mean we'll be brainwashed with circular logic, because that's what all the major religions do. Religions are usually thriving or they sustain in human minds, not because of faith, I believe because of fear. We're afraid, and this fear-mongering brainwashing begins from our very childhood. One of my friends was telling me the other day that this new Islamic channel which you can watch from Sky, it was shown that the Islamic channel was showing that Islamic scholars were teaching children what is hell and what is heaven. So there, when you were teaching children what is hell, how hell is a place you will be tormented in. And then you never allow the child to challenge that brainwashing, that understanding as the child grows, that is embedded in the child's head forever. And women are the worst victims of religions. And society as a whole around the world oppress women this way or other. Maybe in some countries the oppression is less, but in some countries the oppression is far worse. But still, women are the worst victim. Women usually live at home with children more. They give more time to the children, and they are afraid to challenge religious beliefs more, at least in the developed countries, or even and also in the poor countries. It's because generations of oppression, and they don't. So the children are denied of that opportunity where they'll be able to question their religion. They don't even have their mother to be on their side to question their religious beliefs. Usually, like I remember when I was a child, if I got a spanking from my dad, I would go to my mom and try to find a way to sort of convince my mom the way I want something. For example, I would love to go to the to this sports arena to watch my favorite football teams play. Whilst my dad would be emphasizing that I would be concentrating more into my studies. And when I was a bit unruly, my dad would spank me, and I would go over to my mom crying, and my mom would say, okay, let him go this time, But that doesn't really work when it comes to religion. You don't have anywhere to go to. It is common in all religious households, and it is far worse in Islam, because Islam you cannot question, but we will question. We will question. Today I'm going to emphasize on what happens when we die. Well, one thing is for sure, we get buried. That's one thing for sure, we get buried. This burial ritual, it dates back thousands of years. It took various forms, shapes, and the oldest burial ritual we can see is in the modern day, what we know as Netherlands. So what does burial means? I will read you from my notes. Burial is the ritual of placing a dead person or animal, sometimes with objects, into the ground. This is accomplished by excavating a pit or trench and placing the deceased and objects in it and covering it over. Humans have been burying their dead for at least 100,000 years. Methods of burial may be heavily ritualized and can include natural burial, sometimes called green burial, embalming or mummification, the use of containers for the dead, such as shrouds, caskets, grave liners, burial vaults, all of which can retard decomposition of the body. Sometimes objects or grave goods are buried with the body, which may be dressed in fancy or ceremonial garb. Now, there are various forms of graves. There were mass graves in history. There were graves where Mesothelic tomb of, we can see two women of Tabiotic Brittany, where you can see their tools were buried with them in history. And also you can see that the ritual of burying goods or belongings of the dead along with the dead people in the grave was quite common. And we can also see examples of the dead being buried right inside the households. It happened during the Mayan civilization, and you can also see the examples in South American civilizations. And you can also see examples of such in what we know modern day Turkey. Archaeological findings do prove that the dead were being buried right inside their households, along with in the family houses. Even in modern day South Korea, only a few decades ago, it was believed that the dead shouldn't be buried far away from their home, because the farther you bury the dead from their family home, the worse it is for the dead, and it brings curse. But only recently that idea has been changing because of the immense pressure of lack of burial grounds and for the sake of modern living. So governments even have to enact laws to allow burial to be carried out farther away from home. So the tendency of burying the dead in households were quite common around the world. So the longing to keep the dead with you was always there in human minds, and we still, in modern days, we go to graveyards, try to lay flower wreaths, and we don't tend to believe that the dead is dead. We would chuck away things which are not working anymore. For example, we take a car and we have junkyards for the car, yes, but we don't want to believe that the dead body is in a sort of a junk. We'd rather say, we'll try to believe that the dead body has still something to do with our daily life. It is unacceptable for us in our psyche to accept that dead is not going to come back. That dead body is nothing but a waste now. So burial sites from around the world proves that there was a longing always to keep the dead closer to ours, not only emotionally, psychologically, but also physically. In Islam, the dead are buried, and the instructions are to bury the dead as soon as possible. There are also various rituals to guide you how the dead will be placed either in the coffin, or how the dead will be placed in the grave. Muslims usually, Muslim dead bodies are usually tilted facing the Kaaba, the Qibla. So if a Muslim graveyard, you see a dead body is being buried, the face will be turned facing towards the Qibla. There is another religion which is known as Baha'i religion. So in the Baha'i religion, the dead's face is turned towards the Qibli, not Qibla, Qibli is towards the tomb of the founding father of that religion. There are several ways, and also there were examples of how the dead were crossing their hands. There were deities who were put in there were deities who had cross as their symbols, so the dead would be having their hands crossed, and we can find examples of these in dead mummies of Egypt. Now, coming to the issue of mummification, this is another something which has spread during the ancient world. If you see the geography of nations which are mummifying their dead, you can see that this practice was quite common in Africa, and we can see many examples of archaeological findings in the nations of South Africa, and we can see that in Libya mummifications took place in China. To name a few, Zenzui was mummified in China. We can see examples of mummification in Iran, and we can see examples of mummification in Europe as well. Then we have mummification in obviously Egypt. Mummifications took place in Latin American civilizations. In many cases, the dead were placed in a certain statue. sometimes we'll see in some of the ancient rituals included the dead to be having their feet up, or that means upside down. Were being buried upside down because they thought, because it took to a practice where the dead committed usually suicide. So the rituals had a lot to do with the trend that were spread through interaction of human societies regardless of religious differences. Abrahamic faiths, usually they bury their dead, and Christians bury their dead, Muslims bury their dead, but also there are examples of burying in the sea. The famous people who are known people who were buried in the sea included H.G. Wells, and also Robin Williams was buried in the sea. Osama bin Laden was buried in the sea. So we can see the commonness of burying rituals regardless of religious or cultural differences throughout human history. So when I usually asked, yes.
Did you say Robin Williams?
Robin Williams buried in the sea, yes.
The comedy?
The comedian, yes.
Why?
I don't know the answer why, but he was buried into the sea. But I know, for example, others, Neil Armstrong, he was an agnostic man, he was buried into the sea. Probably that's what he wanted, probably, most likely, that's what he wanted. Osama bin Laden was buried because the Americans didn't want a mausoleum to build up surrounding Osama bin Laden's grave. So Osama bin Laden and others were buried in the sea. There are many ways how we get rid of the dead. Even now, in the modern world, they are developing newer ways of burying the dead. Sometimes what they do, they melt the whole body down, they keep the bones and then crush the bones, and they give it to the family of the dead. That becomes more eco-friendly, so that's the way. Because what we can see for sure that throughout history, if you go back 100,000 years up to the modern times, we have become more and more rational in our way of getting rid of our dead, So we have become more and more rational in our approach. So that also should make you think that why is it happening? Why we have this longing for the dead, which has nothing to do with religions, because, for example, Muslims and Christians alone form over 60%, 50% of world population. And now these Muslims and Christians would accept the religions of the ancient past to be true. Christians will say Jesus is the way, Muslims will say this is the only chosen religion. So they will not accept their ways. But you see, there were examples of burials, and there were examples of burials in a certain way, and mummification of the dead were vastly in common. So the majority of the human beings got it all wrong according to the modern religious beliefs. So,
I wanted to ask you before you went on. You say that Muslims bury their dead facing
the Qibla.
Facing the Qibla.
Yes.
So is this the Qibla? There was two positions of the Qibla. There was one, and then it was moved later on.
Yeah,
so
even the Petra.
Yeah, isn't that's where the Qibla is pointed towards Petra? Isn't it?
Yes, Qibla. Yes, I would also say, along with many of the scholars of today, that most likely Muhammad came from Petra, not from Mecca. But we'll give a lecture on that as well in our future lecture series, that how it is all concocted. But coming back to the issue of, we can all agree that we have become more practical when it comes to getting rid of our dead bodies. So religions have also tried to become more rational over the years, and ultimately now we are challenging it head on to all this to be nonsense. But that doesn't mean that we have to have the answers what happened to us. So that these burial rituals should be enough to prove that the religions of today cannot just simply be true suddenly. Because, for example, even Christianity, 2000 years, Islam, 1400 years. So these religions, these rituals dates back thousands of years.
But if you're a Christian, you don't believe that the
Yes,
words are right.
yes, which obviously, so we will make a series on Christianity as well. So this is all proves that when a Muslim asks me, Mufassir, if you die, what's going to happen to your body? If you don't have a religion, how are you going to take care of your funeral? I said, first of all, the answer would be whatever my friends want or my nearest dearest ones, and they want to bury me, they may cremate me, I will have no say to them. If you want to make a Muslim and start worshipping me, I wouldn't like that if I were alive. But that cannot be the reason to hold on to a religion, because you think your religion gives the ultimate answer, the best way of getting rid of the dead, because it doesn't. It doesn't. The best way to get rid of dead body can be in many ways. For example, if I donate my body for science, that is a great thing to do, I would say. And also body parts giving to some other human being who can carry on using that. That's another good thing to do. And again, if you want to get rid of my dead body and cremate my bones and keep it as a memory, you can do that. Some people in some of the traditions, what they do, they make plaques of dead body parts. Some of them will make ashes and then mix it with, say, other things, like cement or other, and they will decorate a plaque, whole wall even, and pay their respect. I know of rituals where they use mushroom, like a mushroom clothing, and then they use that into fabric of using the dead bodies parts. So you can see there is no universal burial. There is no universal way of getting of burial. There is no universal way of saying that is the best way, because we are still progressing. So the reason that you are afraid of what's going to happen in your grave, that's why you want to believe, because Islam is a religion which will tell you things like, if you are buried, if you are not a believer, the munkar nakir or kirabun katibin, the munkar nakir, they will come, the angels will come and ask you questions if you cannot do that, and your punishment starts right there. Because it is another life that you have. You just don't die. You still carry on in your grave. You carry on. You have another life when you are dead in your grave. And the Muslims, especially those who are very religious, will say your punishment is just there. The snake will come. The grave will put a pressure on your dead body, and you will suffer that. It's azab. You will suffer that. So that fear is used in connection with the grave, which is obviously the grave we shouldn't be afraid of, because there's no universal way of getting rid of dead bodies. Sorry.
Can I ask, in Islam, is there, in Catholic faith, believe in purgatory?
Mm-hmm.
So you don't go straight to heaven, you go to a place where you
Yeah.
sort of work off your
Yes.
sins.
Yes.
Does Islam believe
Islam will do the same thing, yes.
Because,
Yes.
I got a taxi over to my granny's yesterday,
Right.
and he was Muslim,
Right.
and he was chanting away, and
Right.
had to be careful. He sort of flared up a wee bit, so I couldn't say too much, but he was saying that, I didn't realise that.
Yes, the same thing, because you see, this kind of views were quite common in other religions as well. It was quite common in Zoroastrian. You can even have the same kind of a story if you read the epic, ancient writing of Homer's, the Iliad. You will see the same journey of mention of dead after journeying through hell and everything. So it's there. So this fear-mongering of grave is nonsense, when the grave itself, the idea of how to bury the dead, cannot be sustained with universal justification that it has always been the best way, because Islam claims to be the religion from Adam, as I started saying from the beginning. So if Adam was the one who showed how to be buried, and all that, he was buried, so we should have seen examples of dead being buried the same way, Islamic way, from the beginning. But there is no archaeological evidence to support that the dead were being buried facing what we know the Qibla for the Muslims of today. There is no archaeological basis for that. Zero. Zero. So we have more archaeological basis of mummification worldwide, but the dead, single dead, dying, and then any dead to show that they were all facing towards Mecca. Absurd. It's not there. Not even Petra. Not even Petra. So it was never there. So okay, let me see if I can remember my geography slightly. Probably I'm getting it right here. More or less, this is the world of today, and this is, say, here we have, say, America, then we have Latin America. So if we found many dead bodies here, archaeological findings of dead bodies here, here, Netherlands here, but we haven't been able to find any kind of serene understanding, a commonness in deaths being buried and facing towards Mecca. It's not there. So it by itself should prove that this ritual was not common and Kaaba was never the center in ancient history. It's quite astounding, isn't it? So quite a finding. So that obviously makes you believe that this is all nonsense.
It makes sense to us, but for some reason Muslims just don't listen to that sort of thing.
Well, I hope this will wake up some of the educated Muslims. They should start thinking. And also, by the way, we have this Boba official site, which is bobaofficial.com, www.bobaofficial.com, where you will find my videos and writing, because I'll be giving more time on my official website rather than on social media, because many of the free thinkers, they are usually barred and blocked out from social media. So to cut that pressure out, will be like you and I all will be contributing more on those websites, and you can all become registered members there. So that's the common fallacy that Muslims have, that it is a religion from Adam up to now. So this proves without a doubt